Imagine a world where power is not inherited but created. A world where alliances are built in smoky back rooms, and one man holds the strings of an entire underground empire. This was the world of Charles "Lucky" Luciano, the real-life Don, who not only rose to prominence in American organized crime, but redefined it, turning scattered gangs into an organized business machine. Far more than a mere gangster, Luciano's influence extended beyond crime into politics, law enforcement, and even national security during World War II. His life and career were so extraordinary that the Hollywood portrayals of mob bosses pale in comparison to the real thing. Born as Salvatore Lucania in 1897, this Sicilian immigrant would go on to become the mastermind behind the modern American Mafia, shaping the structure of organized crime in ways that still endure today. This is the untold story of the real Don of American crime, the man who unified the chaos of streets of New York and brought ruthless efficiency to the underworld. Salvatore Lucania's journey began in 1906 when his family immigrated to New York City's Lower East Side, which was a hub for Italian immigrants. By age 14, Luciano had dropped out of school, earning $7 a week delivering hats. However, after winning a hefty $244 in a dice game, he quit his job and turned to street life. Luciano's parents, worried about his future, sent him to the Brooklyn Truancy School, but this did little to stop his growing ambitions. As a teenager, Luciano formed his own gang and joined the infamous 5 Points Gang. Unlike most street gangs focused on petty crime, Luciano's group offered protection to Jewish kids from Italian and Irish gangs, charging 10 cents a week. This was when he met Meyer Lansky, another teenage gangster, who would become his lifelong partner in crime. Luciano respected Lansky's courage, and their partnership would later reshape the entire underworld. Luciano earned the nickname Lucky after surviving a brutal beating and throat slashing in 1929, which was rumored to be retaliation for refusing to work for another crime boss. Some say the nickname came from his gambling luck, or it could have been a simple mispronunciation of his last name. From 1916 to 1936, Luciano was arrested 25 times for various crimes like assault, illegal gambling, and robbery. Yet he somehow managed to avoid serious jail time, which became a testament to his luck in navigating the dangerous world of organized crime. But first, Luciano would have to survive Prohibition, the violent era that marked his true rise to power. Prohibition, which began in 1920, outlawed the production and sale of alcohol in the United States, but instead of curbing drinking, it created a black market for liquor that made criminals fabulously rich. Luciano entered the bootlegging business, and it wasn't long before he earned a reputation for being not only tough but also shrewd. By the early 1930s, Luciano had aligned himself with Joe Masseria, one of the dominant bosses in New York. But this was a time of chaos within the Mafia, as old-school Sicilian bosses, known as the Mustache Petes, were stuck to the old ways of doing things. They believed in keeping control within Sicilian circles, and often engaged in violent territorial wars. This resulted in the Castellammarese War, a brutal conflict between rival factions of the New York Mafia. Luciano, however, had different ideas. He saw the potential for organized crime to function more like a business, where cooperation could replace constant infighting. He wanted to build a system where different families could coexist peacefully and profitably. To achieve this, he knew he had to get rid of the old guard, starting with his own boss, Joe Masseria. In a masterstroke of treachery, Luciano switched sides during the Castellammarese War. He secretly aligned himself with Masseria's rival, Salvatore Maranzano, and in April 1931, Luciano lured Masseria to a restaurant where his men gunned the boss down. Luciano thought that by helping Maranzano, he would secure his own rise to power, but when Maranzano declared himself boss of all bosses, Luciano realized that nothing had really changed. In September of the same year, Maranzano had become suspicious of Luciano and hired an Irish gangster to wipe him out in a meeting with the bosses. However, Luciano acted first and assassinated Maranzano on the night that would later be fabled as the night of the Sicilian Vespers. Luciano also orchestrated assassinations including Maranzano, 2 allies, and heads of the Pittsburgh and Los Angeles crime families. However, this idea of an organized mass purge directed by Luciano, has been debunked as a myth that would later be regarded as part of this alleged plan to quickly eliminate the Mustache Pete's. With Maranzano gone, Luciano didn't claim the title of boss of all bosses for himself. Instead, he abolished the position, replacing it with a democratic system that would forever change the Mafia. Luciano's most important contribution to the Mafia was the creation of the Commission, an unprecedented innovation in organized crime. The Commission was a board of directors made up of the heads of the most powerful Mafia families in America. Under this system, no single boss would have absolute authority. Instead, disputes between families would be settled by vote, and business matters were handled collectively. This not only reduced the bloodshed between rival families, but also allowed for the smooth expansion of criminal enterprises across the country. The Commission's power extended beyond New York. It included families from Chicago, led by Al Capone, and others from cities as far-flung as Buffalo and Philadelphia. Luciano was the mastermind behind this system, and while he was technically an equal with other bosses on the Commission, everyone knew who the real power was. His influence was unparalleled, and he was considered the first among equals. Luciano's ability to maintain peace and cooperation between Mafia families allowed organized crime to diversify. Under Luciano's guidance, the Mafia didn't just focus on bootlegging during Prohibition. They expanded into gambling, extortion, drug trafficking, and even legitimate businesses. The Mafia, under Luciano, became more like a multinational corporation than a collection of street gangs. The system he created was so effective that it survived long after his exile and even into the modern day. One of Luciano's most lucrative enterprises was his control of New York's prostitution ring, which became known as the Combination. It's estimated that Luciano's prostitution racket earned him millions of dollars each year, a staggering amount for the time. Luciano, however, rarely got his hands dirty. He delegated the day-to-day operations to his lieutenants and trusted advisors, including his close associate, Vito Genovese. But this very operation would lead to Luciano's downfall. In 1936, New York's special prosecutor, Thomas E. Dewey, set his sights on Luciano. Dewey was determined to take down the Mafia, and Luciano was the biggest target. After months of investigation, Dewey successfully prosecuted Luciano on charges of compulsory prostitution. Despite Luciano's attempts to intimidate witnesses and bribe officials, Dewey was relentless, and Luciano was convicted and sentenced to 30 to 50 years in prison. Many believed that this would mark the end of his reign, but they were wrong. Even behind bars, Luciano's influence could not be contained. His power was so vast that during World War II, the US government turned to Luciano for help. Fearing that Axis powers might sabotage New York's vital port facilities, the US Navy reached out to the Mafia to secure the docks and keep watch for potential threats. Luciano, while still in prison, played a key role in organizing the Mafia's cooperation with the US government. This arrangement, known as Operation Underworld, was one of the most unusual alliances in American history. In exchange for his help, Luciano's sentence was significantly reduced. In 1946, Luciano was released from prison and deported to Italy. Although Luciano was exiled from the United States, his control over organized crime was far from over. From his new base in Italy, Luciano continued to exert influence over the Mafia in America, particularly in the international drug trade. He met with Mafia leaders from around the world and coordinated global heroin smuggling operations. Luciano's exile did little to diminish his status as a top figure in the underworld. Despite being physically separated from the US, Luciano remained deeply involved in Mafia operations until his death. On January 26, 1962, Luciano died of a heart attack at Naples Airport. He had gone there to meet with American producer Martin Gosch about a film based on his life. After the meeting, Luciano had a heart attack and he died on the spot, unaware that Italian drug agents had followed him to the airport in anticipation of arresting him on drug smuggling charges. In the end, Lucky Luciano was more than just a mere gangster. He was a visionary who transformed the chaotic, violent world of organized crime into a sophisticated, far-reaching enterprise. He saw beyond the petty squabbles of street gangs and recognized that cooperation, structure, and efficiency could turn the Mafia into a national and even international power.